The modern phenomenon of women deliberately choosing single motherhood when a perfectly capable father is available and willing to co-parent represents one of the most selfish trends in contemporary society. This disturbing pattern goes far beyond cases of abuse or abandonment, revealing a troubling mindset that prioritizes maternal control over children's fundamental need for both parents. What we're witnessing is the normalization of fatherlessness as a lifestyle choice rather than a last resort, with devastating consequences that ripple through families and society at large. The psychological and social impacts of this decision demand honest examination, no matter how uncomfortable the truths may be. Society has been sold a dangerous lie that single motherhood by choice represents some form of female empowerment, when in reality it's often an act of profound selfishness disguised as feminism. The celebratory narratives surrounding strong independent mothers deliberately ignore overwhelming evidence showing children from fatherless homes experience higher rates of poverty, emotional disorders, and behavioral problems. True empowerment would mean recognizing that children thrive best with both parents actively involved in their lives, not congratulating women for making unilateral decisions that serve their own interests at the expense of their children's well-being. This cultural glorification of single motherhood has created a generation of women who view fathers as optional accessories rather than essential parents. Psychological research reveals that many women who choose single motherhood, despite having good men available, display marked narcissistic traits in their parenting approach. These women operate under the delusion that only they truly know what's best for their child, dismissing the father's perspective and contributions as unnecessary or inferior. This arrogant mindset fails to recognize that children benefit immensely from having two loving parents with potentially different but complementary parenting styles. The narcissistic mother's need for complete control over every aspect of parenting ultimately deprives her child of the balanced upbringing they deserve, all because she can't tolerate sharing authority or compromising on decisions. One of the most disturbing aspects of this phenomenon is how readily these women exploit a family court system that overwhelmingly favors mothers in custody disputes. Even when presented with clear evidence of a father's stability, good character, and desire to be involved, courts frequently default to granting primary custody to mothers. This systemic bias enables and even encourages maternal selfishness by providing legal sanction to women who want to exclude fathers from their children's lives without justification. The message this sends is deeply troubling, that a mother's preference trumps a child's right to both parents, and that fathers must somehow prove their worthiness for basic parental rights that should be automatically granted. Many women who choose single motherhood despite having capable partners do so with full knowledge that the state will force the father to provide financial support through child support payments. This creates a perverse incentive structure where women can enjoy the financial benefits of parenthood without having to tolerate the natural compromises that come with co-parenting. Some women essentially treat child support as an entitlement program, demanding maximum payments, while simultaneously restricting the father's access to his own children. This cash-and-carry approach to parenting reduces fatherhood to a financial transaction, rather than recognizing it as an irreplaceable relationship that children need for healthy development. A particularly selfish manifestation of this trend appears in cases where women divorce or leave good men, then decide they want children without the inconvenience of dealing with the father. These women essentially treat childbearing as a form of personal fulfillment, using their children as props in their own emotional narratives rather than considering what's best for the child. The do-over baby phenomenon reveals how some women view parenthood as something that should conform entirely to their preferences and schedules, with no regard for how the absence of a father might impact the child's emotional development and sense of identity. Platforms like Instagram and TikTok have created dangerous echo chambers that glorify and romanticize single motherhood, rewarding women with likes, shares, and viral attention for posts about doing it all alone. This social media feedback loop reinforces selfish decision-making by providing immediate external validation for choices that may actually harm children in the long term. Women chasing this artificial validation often craft carefully curated narratives that portray themselves as heroic single mums, while deliberately obscuring the reality that there's a perfectly capable father who wants to be involved, but has been systematically excluded from his child's life. Perhaps one of the cruelest aspects of this phenomenon is how it punishes good men who are genuinely willing and eager to be active, engaged fathers. Many of these excluded fathers didn't abuse their partners, didn't abandon their families, and didn't fail in their responsibilities. They simply found themselves at the mercy of a mother who unilaterally decided she'd rather parent alone. The psychological toll on these men is devastating, as they're forced to fight expensive legal battles just to maintain basic access to their own children, often facing false accusations and systemic bias along the way. This represents a profound injustice that society has been far too quick to overlook. At the heart of many elective single motherhood decisions lies an unrealistic fantasy of complete parental control. The notion that raising a child without input from the father will somehow create an ideal, conflict-free parenting experience. This fantasy ignores the fundamental reality that parenting is inherently messy and challenging, and that children benefit from being exposed to different perspectives and approaches. The mother who insists on total control isn't demonstrating strength. She's revealing her own emotional immaturity and inability to compromise, traits that will ultimately limit her effectiveness as a parent, and model poor conflict resolution skills for her child. Some women who choose single motherhood despite having good men available employ sophisticated forms of emotional manipulation to justify their decisions and maintain control. They may gaslight fathers into believing they're somehow inadequate, or manipulate children into viewing the father negatively. Some engage in parental alienation, systematically poisoning the child's relationship with their father to solidify their own position as the sole parent. These tactics are profoundly damaging to children's psychological development and represent one of the most toxic forms of emotional abuse that can occur within family systems. Women who deliberately exclude good fathers from their children's lives are setting up those children, especially daughters, for future relationship difficulties. The psychological literature is clear that girls raised without involved fathers often struggle with intimacy, trust, and self-worth in their adult relationships. By choosing single motherhood when it's unnecessary, these women aren't breaking cycles of dysfunction. They're creating new ones. The irony is that many women who make this choice likely had difficult relationships with their own fathers, yet they're recreating that same father absence for their children rather than breaking the pattern. Study after study has demonstrated that children raised in single-parent homes face significant disadvantages across nearly every measure of well-being, from academic performance to mental health outcomes. The women who choose single motherhood despite having good partners available are making a conscious decision to prioritize their own preferences over their children's documented needs. This represents a fundamental failure of parental responsibility, as true parenting requires sacrificing personal desires when they conflict with what's best for the child. The willful ignorance of this overwhelming evidence suggests either profound selfishness or a disturbing ability to rationalize harmful decisions. Some women opt for single motherhood simply because it seems more convenient than having to negotiate parenting decisions with the father. This lazy approach to parenting reflects a concerning cultural shift that views fatherhood as an optional extra rather than an essential component of child rearing. These women want the joys and satisfactions of parenthood without the hard work of maintaining healthy co-parenting relationships, essentially treating children like personal projects rather than human beings with complex emotional needs. This convenience-based parenting philosophy fails to recognize that what's easiest for the mother is rarely what's best for the child. Many elective single mothers craft elaborate victim narratives to justify their decisions, even when the father has demonstrated nothing but good character and willingness to co-parent. By framing themselves as victims of circumstances rather than active decision-makers, these women avoid taking responsibility for the consequences of their choices. This victim mentality allows them to portray their unilateral decision to exclude the father as something that was done to them rather than something they chose, thereby deflecting criticism and maintaining their self-image as blameless. The psychological gymnastics required to sustain this fiction are impressive, but ultimately harmful to all involved. Modern culture has increasingly promoted the idea that fathers are optional, that women can simply use men for their genetic material and then dismiss them from their children's lives. This dehumanizing sperm donor mentality reduces fatherhood to a biological function rather than recognizing it as an ongoing relationship that children need and deserve. Women who adopt this mindset view fathers as interchangeable and disposable, failing to recognize the unique, irreplaceable role that each parent plays in a child's development. The cultural acceptance of this attitude represents a dangerous degradation of the value we place on fatherhood. Some women justify their choice of single motherhood by pointing to their financial independence, arguing that since they can support a child alone, they don't need the father's involvement. This argument ignores the fact that children need far more from their fathers than just financial support. They need their time, their guidance, their love, and their unique masculine perspective. Money can buy many things, but it can't replace the bond between a child and their father. The women who make this argument are revealing their materialistic view of parenting, where financial resources are valued more highly than emotional ones. Some women approach single motherhood as a kind of social experiment, testing feminist theories about family structures without regard for how their choices might impact their children. These women treat their children's lives as laboratories for their ideological convictions, gambling with their well-being to prove a political point. This represents an unconscionable use of children as pawns in adult ideological battles, prioritizing abstract principles over concrete human needs. The women who engage in this experimentation rarely consider what might happen if their theories prove wrong. It's the children who bear all the risk. The popular "I don't need a man" slogan has been twisted to justify all manner of selfish decisions, including elective single motherhood. While independence can be healthy, this particular brand of hyper-independence as it relates to parenting is fundamentally misguided. The issue isn't whether the mother needs a man, it's whether the child needs a father. This arrogant attitude reveals a shocking lack of empathy for children's needs, as it places the mother's desire for complete autonomy above her child's right to two loving parents. Many women who choose single motherhood despite having good partners available take full advantage of child support systems while simultaneously limiting the father's actual involvement in parenting. This creates a perverse situation where fathers are reduced to financial providers rather than recognized as full parents. Some women even use child support payments as leverage, threatening to restrict access if payments aren't made on time or in full. This transactional approach to parenting is morally bankrupt, treating children as sources of income rather than human beings who need meaningful relationships with both parents. Children raised without involved fathers are more likely to experience loneliness, depression, and difficulty forming healthy attachments later in life. The women who choose single motherhood when it's unnecessary are effectively setting their children up for these struggles, all to satisfy their own desire for control or independence. This is particularly tragic because it's completely preventable. The father is available and willing, but being excluded by the mother's choice. As society grapples with a growing loneliness epidemic, we must recognize how family fragmentation and father absence contribute to this crisis. The impact of elective single motherhood is particularly devastating for boys, who suffer immensely from the absence of paternal guidance. Research shows that boys raised without fathers are more likely to struggle with aggression, academic performance, and self-control. The women who choose to exclude good fathers from their sons' lives are essentially handicapping those boys, depriving them of the male role models they desperately need to navigate the challenges of growing up. This generational damage extends far beyond individual families, contributing to societal problems like crime and educational underachievement. Some women approach motherhood with what can only be described as a princess syndrome, an unrealistic expectation that everything should conform perfectly to their preferences. When co-parenting inevitably requires compromise, as all relationships do, these women would rather jettison the father entirely than adjust their expectations. This immature approach to parenting reveals an entitlement mentality that prioritizes the mother's comfort over the child's needs. True adulthood, and especially true parenthood, requires the ability to negotiate differences and find common ground, skills these women conspicuously lack. Many welfare programs and social services inadvertently encourage single motherhood by providing greater benefits to unmarried mothers. Some women make calculated decisions to exclude fathers because doing so qualifies them for housing assistance, food stamps, or other forms of government aid. This creates a perverse system where taxpayers essentially subsidize father absence with all the negative social consequences that follow. Until we reform these incentive structures, we'll continue seeing women make selfish choices that harm children but benefit them financially. The cultural celebration of the strong, independent single mother has created a dangerous facade that obscures the reality of these situations. Many women adopt this identity as a way to avoid confronting the selfishness of their choices, using the language of empowerment to justify behavior that actually represents emotional weakness. True strength would involve working through co-parenting challenges rather than taking the easy way out. The women who cling most tightly to this strong woman narrative are often the ones most afraid of genuine partnership and compromise. Children raised in elective single-mother households often develop resentment towards their mothers as they grow older and realize they were deliberately deprived of a relationship with their father. This is particularly true when siblings compare their experiences to friends who grew up with both parents present. The damage from these realizations can take decades to manifest, often surfacing when these children become parents themselves and struggle with relationships. The mothers who make these choices rarely anticipate this long-term fallout, focused only on their immediate desires rather than the lifetime consequences for their children. Society pays little attention to the profound trauma experienced by good men who are systematically excluded from their children's lives. These fathers suffer in silence, watching from the sidelines as another person, often the mother's new partner, plays the paternal role they desperately want to fill. The psychological toll includes depression, anxiety, and even suicidal ideation in some cases. The women who inflict this pain rarely consider the father's perspective, so focused are they on their own desires and convenience. Elective single motherhood doesn't just affect the immediate family, it ripples out to extended family networks, particularly grandparents. When mothers unilaterally decide to exclude fathers, they often simultaneously cut off the paternal grandparents as well. This deprives children of valuable relationships with loving grandparents who could provide additional support, wisdom, and family connection. The selfishness of this decision is compounded when we consider that grandparents often have limited legal rights to maintain relationships with their grandchildren once the mother decides to sever ties. Women who choose to exclude good fathers from their children's lives often find themselves facing unexpected consequences in the dating market. Many high-quality men view this behavior as a red flag, recognizing it as evidence of poor conflict resolution skills and selfish decision-making. As these women attempt to form new relationships, they frequently discover that their past choices have made them less desirable partners, particularly to men who value family stability and fairness. The irony is that by trying to avoid compromise with one man, they've made it harder to find happiness with another. The consequences of elective single motherhood extend far beyond individual families, creating significant costs for society as a whole. Children from fatherless homes are more likely to require special education services, more likely to become involved in the criminal justice system, and more likely to need government assistance as adults. These outcomes represent enormous social and economic burdens that all taxpayers must bear. When women choose single motherhood despite having good partners available, they're not just making personal decisions, they're imposing costs on everyone else. The trend of women choosing single motherhood when capable fathers are available represents one of the most selfish and short-sighted developments in modern parenting culture. These decisions, often dressed up in the language of empowerment, actually reveal profound immaturity and self-absorption. Children aren't accessories or lifestyle choices. They're human beings who deserve the love and guidance of both parents whenever possible. It's time we stopped celebrating these choices and started holding women accountable for the damage they cause when they deliberately exclude good fathers from their children's lives. True feminism should advocate for children's rights to both parents, not just mothers' rights to exclude fathers. Until we have this honest conversation, we'll continue seeing generations of children pay the price for their mothers' selfish decisions.